Alright, let's go ahead and launch Unity. Tonight we're going to be making... Oh, I already have it running. My bad. A first-person shooter, so let's create a new project. And I'll just call it, I don't know, I'm not feeling very creative tonight, so I'm just going to call it FPS. Or maybe I'm just saving my creativity for the task at hand. Yeah, that's the ticket. I'm not going to bring anything in because I want to make sure you know, I'm sure you know, but I want to make sure you know how to do that on the fly rather than doing it here. Okay, so I'm just going to create FPS. There we go. Bless you. And we're going to start by creating the environment. So I want to make sure that we run through all of the tools that you can use in Unity to make a nice outdoor environment. They're pretty extensive. So we're going to make the, as part of an adjunct to our first-person shooter, the surroundings for it are going to be the classic island outside. Probably not really island because we're not going to use the standard trees very much. The joke that I always make is Unity out of the box allows you to make a really awesome pirate game because the only things that they give you in terms of free assets are palm trees. So you can make a really, really cool game as long as it's in a tropical climate. But we have lots of other things that we can bring in pretty easily. So let's just start with this. So we'll go into Game Object and we'll create a terrain. Now there's a trick to creating a terrain. Have you guys done terrains before in your intro classes?
No.
I wouldn't think that you had. You've probably played with it, but you haven't had the formal walkthrough. There is a trick to this. So you kind of have to follow the right setup steps. I usually go ahead and zero out the transform, but I can see that it already is, so I don't need to do that here. But you do have to set your terrain up before you start messing with it. If you don't, then you're going to find yourself in a little bit of trouble.
As the character in South Park says, you're gonna have a bad time.
Exactly. You're gonna have a, yeah, I had forgotten about that guy. You're gonna have a bad time. Exactly.
That's a new one.
That's pretty funny. Okay. So we've got our terrain selected. There's two places where you have to go to set this up. So the first one is obvious and the second one is not obvious. Go to the gear first. That would be the obvious one. And the gear allows you to set lots of parameters for your terrain. And there's lots of them here. We don't really need to mess with any of them for our purposes except for one. I'm going to change the resolution of the terrain from 2000 by 2000, which is pretty big. I'm going to make it something quite a bit smaller. 400 by 400 just to make it a little bit more manageable. But if you want to make a larger terrain, there's no penalty for it. The thing about the terrain object is that you may be thinking, well, if you make a big one, you're adding lots of polygons. So that's true, you are adding lots of polygons. But those polygons are not resolved all the time. They're not computed all the time. So a lot of what we're going to discuss tonight is going to be about optimization because this is where you see the most internal optimization that Unity has to offer. So if you haven't finished your Unity quiz, your Unity test, this would be a good time to play bingo because we're going to catch a lot of answers for that particular quiz in tonight's session. Okay, so we've changed our terrain to 400 by 400 just to make it a little bit smaller. So if we drop a character into the middle of this sucker, it won't take us 20 minutes to walk to the other side of it. Okay, so the other thing that you have to change is and it's a little bit deceptive. You need to go over into this second one, the paint height. And let me show you why this is deceptive. First of all, you have to come in here if you're going to do this. But if I go back over to the gear, the first few times that you do this, you might be tempted to look at terrain height and think that that's going to set the boundaries for the terrain height because it says terrain height, right? Why would you not use that? As it happens, the terrain height is actually set over here. And the first thing that you have to do is click this flatten button. If you don't do this, you're not going to have a good time. If you don't do this, what's really going to happen is you're not going to be able to paint depressions in your terrain, and you're probably going to want to do that. So come over here and click flatten, and it will flatten it. Now that has another capacity here. If we come in here and paint some terrain and we decide that we hate it, we can always come back over here and click flatten, and it will flatten it back to 0. This basically zeroes out the terrain into a flat surface. Well, it didn't disappear, it probably moved. And the other thing to remember about the terrain is that it's one-sided, right? So if I go underneath it, you won't be able to see it. But if you're above it, it's there. So it's easy to lose it. Just kind of make sure that you're above it. And you can always select it in the hierarchy and press F, and it should frame it up for you. Okay, did you get it back? All right, so let's take this in due course. I'll start with the first terrain tool. This allows you to raise and lower your terrain by painting the height. So this is like painting a little picture, a little map, and I'll show you exactly what that map is and what it's called a little bit later. But these are paint brushes, and effectively what you can do is you can come in here and you can paint your terrain very easily by just painting areas. If you want to paint a depression, which was the point of our exercise just a moment ago, of clicking the flatten button, you hold down shift and you'll make a depression. If you find yourself unable to make a depression, you have forgotten to go in and click flatten before you start working. So holding down shift will depress it. Anything else will raise it. So just by manner of illustration, I'll go back over into our paint height, the second button, I'll click flatten, and it all goes away. And I don't think Control Z will bring it back. Oh, it does. They must have fixed that. Didn't used to. It used to, if you hit flatten, you're out of luck. Okay, so what you want to do is paint some ranges. Just paint some area. Whoa. A little big there.
It goes really fast.
Yeah, it does go really fast. You can mitigate this, right? So let's take care of that. Let's go back into the raise lower, and brush size will help you, but opacity, if you bring the opacity level down, then it's not going to grow as quickly. So usually what I want to do, if I want to make, I usually like to make edges so that when you're looking at it from afar, you're kind of looking at a berm, right? So you don't have this boring flat horizon. And in addition to that, what I'll often do is, no one likes a completely flat surface, right? So if I'm just going to make, something that's otherwise flat and boring, I'll use some of these sort of stippled brushes that they have down here, and I'll just come in here and just give it a little bit of this action. Maybe I'll make my brush size really big, and now I can rough up the terrain wholesale, one click at a time, and then it's not going to make too big of an impression. But at the same time, it gives us enough visual interest versus a flat area. Okay, so I'll let you work out your masterpiece for just a minute there. And make sure you have at least some sort of raised area and also some sort of lowered area.
It looks like the Google Earth lunar map.
Does a little bit.
Oh no, use the stifle on the mountains too. It gives them a more weathered look.
Okay, next tool over, we've kind of played with it a little bit, is paint height. So what this really does, aside from having the flatten button here, it allows you to paint to a specific height. So the height right now is set to 120. I'll set it to, I don't know, maybe 60 or 70, something like that. Something reasonable, and I'll paint. Oops. Well, that was unexpected, wasn't it? I have no explanation for why that did that. Okay, so what it should do is paint to the height and then stop, right? So this is great for making plateaus. If you want to paint up to a specific height. Looks like a great place for a boss fight, doesn't it? So that's what paint height does. It allows you to paint to a specific height. The next one over is the smooth tool. So that's like a smooth tool in any other 3D application that you may have used. It just roughs out the smooth edges. So if you want your rocks to be less craggy, then you can use the smooth tool to smooth them out. Okay, for my next trick, our next tool is the brush. So this allows you to paint textures, and this is really pretty interesting how they do this. You start off with a base texture, and then you can layer other textures on top of it. So let's look at how to do that. So with the paint tool selected, or the paint textures tool selected, come down and find the button labeled Edit Textures, and it's going to tell you that there are none currently defined. And if I click Edit Textures and Add Texture, I can add any textures that are in here. However, I have not added anything that I can use yet. So the first thing I'm going to want to do after I've got my terrain, I'm ready to start painting my textures, is I want to bring in the assets that I can use for this. So I'm going to go over to Assets, Import Package, and let's bring in the terrain assets. I'll click Import. It will bring them in. And now I should have something to choose from. At least I thought I would. Maybe I forgot something. Let me look. Yeah, I'm missing something, aren't I? Oh, there it is. Gah. You're right. It's that tiny little button there that I keep missing. Okay, so we want to click on the select button. There we go. They all look pretty good. I would suggest that you start with either the grass or the grass and the rock, unless you have a lot of mountains. We're going to use all of them here in just a minute, so I would say just start with grass and rock and add that one. Okay, so the first one that you pick is going to assume that that's the base, and that's going to apply everywhere. And they've done a pretty good job at making something that looks nice when it's repeated. But you can see up here that we've got artifacting, right? It's obvious that it's a repeating texture. So that's why it's important to add multiple textures and layer them together. So let's do that. Let's add the second texture. And this time let's do the grassy hill. You want to stay away from these that look like blades of grass. Those are for something else. So get the one that's called Grass Hill. We'll add that in. And here's the thing that most people miss. This right here is a very subtle way of telling you that that's the one that's selected by the painting tool. So this little blue line down here, if you're painting, that's what it's going to be painting with. If you want to paint with the other one, you got to click on the other one. So it's really, I think it's really subtle. And now you can come in here and paint.
I'll have something that looks like a little lake too. In my terrain. So I can use the third texture.
And same deal, you can change the opacity and target strength to make it a little bit more subtle in the way that it blends. At this juncture, I'm tempted to bust out a big hair wig and do Bob Ross. Oh wait, I should wait till we do trees. Pretty trees, pretty clouds. We're going to do trees here in a minute. Okay, now I've got a golf course. That's okay. And I will do the third one, just because I think it's cool, which is the cliff layer. And I use that literally for the sides of my mountains. So I'm going to bring this down so that I can control it a little better. And I forgot to pick it. There we go. Pretty good for the side of a cliff.
How do we make like water?
We'll do that in a minute. Obvious, right? That's why I put the crater there. So we could put the lake in. All right, let me see. Where's the... All right, now would be a good time to save my scene, so I'll do that. I'll just call it lake. I don't really care what you call it. Okay, one of the things I want to stop and show you real quick is our terrain has an asset associated with it. And I want to show you what that is. This is called a splat map. Anyone heard of a splat map before? Actually, I think they moved the article somewhere else. Yeah, texture splatting. So there's a good article on texture splatting. I'm not going to read it to you. I just wanted to point it out. You can read that at your leisure. So essentially what's going on here is you can kind of see what's going on here. Different colors represent where these different textures are painted, right? So the red is the first one, and anywhere the red appears, it's going to map that texture. And the second one is the second texture that we painted, which was the grass. And you can tell that there's an alpha channel here, so you can tell, you know, that this area is a lot darker than this area. and that's how they do the different strengths and the different opacities as to how things are going to show through one another. So that's what a splat map is. It uses RGB and the alpha channel to store the data that you're using to create this terrain texture. And then of course my third texture, the blue one, is the cliff texture that just lines the lip of the cliff and the inside of my little lake bed here. So what's the obvious question that you want to ask me at this point?
How'd you bring the splat map out?
That wasn't it, but what was your question?
Oh, how did you bring the splat map out?
It's under your assets, so I usually use this all the way down like this, but if you didn't, this little arrow here tells you that there's more stuff. So if you click that, then you'll see it. But I like to work with it all the way over, in which case you can see it in the drop down here. I forget that that little arrow is there. That's why I like this, because I'm used to seeing that in a hierarchy. That's just how I do it. Okay, so the obvious question, or maybe not so obvious question, is how many channels do we have here? 3, really, right? I mean, we could probably do something with the alpha channel, but technically we can only put 3 textures in here, right? No, you can add more splat maps. If I add yet another texture, a 4th texture on here, it's going to be fine, but what's going to happen is it's going to create another splat map, and it will take those splat maps and it will combine them. And the only trade-off at this point is the size. So the splat map is 1.3 megabytes. So that's not exactly tiny. If you want something that's going to play on a phone, you want it to be tiny, right? So this may be a barrier for you. The more you add, the larger this is going to get. So if you have 20 textures in here, you're talking about probably 5 to 15 megabytes. Well, not 15. It would be 6.5 megabytes, right? So just bear that in mind. You are increasing the size of your final package based on the size of the splat maps, and that of course doesn't include the textures themselves. It just includes that splat map.
Can you change your can you change the splat map directly?
You probably could. You could probably open this in Photoshop because it is just an RGB image. I don't know what benefit that would give you, but I don't see why you couldn't. I mean, you can drill down into the hierarchy in Explorer and find that image and probably open it in Photoshop. I haven't tried it, but I don't see why you couldn't. Okay, I'm going to go back to the terrain, unless there are other questions. Okay.
Let's go emergency protocols.
All right, back to my terrain. The next part of our little enterprise would be trees. So this is where I should bust out the Bob Ross. Pretty trees. Or does he do pretty clouds? I guess he does both.
I think it's happy.
Happy trees, that's what it is.
Happy little trees.
Happy little trees. Okay, let's do some happy little trees, and then I'll show you how to do some happy little clouds. Happy little trees. Okay, this is the pattern for the rest of this stuff. You want to edit the trees. They're not there because you haven't pulled any in yet. We got them when we brought in terrain assets, so we can go add a tree. And instead of the little select button, this is what I was looking for in the other one. I couldn't find it. There's a little dot there. Like I said, comes with a palm tree. We'll start with the palm tree. And there's a bend factor here that you can change if you want to. I don't know, we'll set it to something. I usually don't mess with it. So this may look really weird. Okay, same deal as before. You've got your trees here, and the one that's blue is the one that's selected. So what we'll do is we've got all these different settings here for the trees, but it's pretty easy to figure out what this does. I'm going to make my tree size, let's see, tree density. Okay. And just start playing around with it a little bit. Now, if you're painting trees and you don't see any trees, it's time to start talking about optimization. And optimization will come into play probably a lot more when you start talking about the grass. In fact, let's just save the optimization talk for the grass. But suffice to say that details on a terrain are going to change depending on how far away you are from the details that you're looking at. So we're going to see that when we do grass. It's less apparent with the trees, but I'll tell you about billboarding here in just a minute, because that's how the trees work. Okay, so we've got some trees in here. If I want to, I can hold down Shift and I can wipe out the trees. And it's selective. It's going to wipe out the species of tree that you have selected, right? So we can add them in, we can take them out. We can adjust tree density. So if we want a sparse beach-like thing with, you know, just a few trees, we can set the density fairly low, or if we want a thick jungle, we can set it way up high and get a thick jungle. Probably too thick. If you want to make a barrier, there's better ways to do it. That's a standard practice of level designers, right? You put some sort of visual barrier at the edge of your maps.
Crates everywhere.
Yes, crates, some sort of something that you can't get past. And you might be tempted to, you know, do something like that. I wouldn't. There's probably better ways to do it. That's a lot of geometry. Okay, the other thing that you can do with this is you can have variance with respect to the trees. So the base variant, or the base height for this tree is 100 meters, which is pretty high. And then you have variation. So you can adjust how much variation there is. So the higher the variation, the more variance you're going to get with respect to the height of the trees. Some of them are going to be short, some of them are going to be tall. Same deal with width. You can adjust the variance. And color variation is fun to play with too. That means you'll get some of the trees will have green leaves, and some will have like less green leaves, more yellow leaves, and it just makes it look more natural.
Mine have black, burnt.
Yeah, you probably don't want that. You don't want burnt leaves. I don't know. Maybe that's part of your game, right? I would submit to you that that level of detail matters on maps where you're looking for things like some sort of quest map versus something that's a lot of combat. If this is a run and gun game and you're fighting for your life all the time, you're really probably not looking up at the leaves very much. I don't know, maybe you are. So probably not something you want to think about. But if you're doing like an adventure game where you're running around looking for stuff, looking for the crystal key or whatever, then that might be a little bit nicer. Okay. Palm trees, as I said, are a bit urbane, right? So let's go get some different trees. We're going to get them from the asset store. So let's go to Window and bring up the asset store. And you're going to need an asset store account. Don't worry, we won't buy anything. They do. I mean, it's amazing how much free stuff there is in the asset store.
There we go. I cut up on the trees.
Okay. Oh, look, there's Poser Game Dev. Half price. Bada bing. I got mine, incidentally. I did get mine for half price.
For free on the higher day. Well, the upgrade is really cheap.
Well, I think they really want game developers to start using it. It's kind of a new niche for them.
Yeah.
And nobody's really exploiting it yet. Well, I guess Maya is. They've got that indie version that's designed to do exactly the work with Unity for, what, like $800, which is reasonable. Compared to
like smooth out your terrain.
$3,500. Okay, what are we looking for? We're looking for trees. And perfect, I wanted the shantytown trees. But as you can see, there's lots of options in here. Not all of them are free, but they're not very expensive either. So I'm going to go with the shantytown trees just because they're free. I'll click download. try to remember what my account is. May take 2 or 3 tries. Maybe I'll edit it out, maybe I won't. Oh, first try.
I have a quick question. How can I like smooth out the terrain?
With the terrain smooth brush, which is apparently unavailable while we're importing assets. But it's the third one over.
Does it have like a teardrop on the map?
It does. It's that one right there. Okay. So now I should be able to go in and edit tree, add tree, and I should have a few more options now. Oops. My own cautionary tale. Don't forget you have to come in here and pick it. You're still in the palm tree, you gotta pick that one. You can mix them together. So sort of intersperse them together. It's probably also worth mentioning that Unity computes the density as it goes, so I'm holding down my mouse button here, moving my mouse button back and forth. You notice I'm not getting new trees. That's because it's computed the optimal density already, and it's already put all the trees that it's going to put there. So if I just keep coloring, I'm not going to see any difference, really, unless I change the density. So if I go over and change tree density, then I'll get a different result, but it does go ahead and compute the optimal density for vegetation. Okay, the only other thing worth noting about trees, I would direct your attention to this part down here. When we created the terrain, we got a terrain collider automatically, and we also got tree colliders. So you are going to be able to detect when things are running into your trees. Okay, any questions? Have you fixed your trees the way you like them? Good. I'm just going to do the 2. You get the idea. Alright, the next thing we're going to look at are the terrain details. So that's the next to last button over. There are 2 things that you can create with terrain details. You can create grass, and you can create other terrain details. And I'm purposely going to screw the second detail up so that you can see a mistake that is quite comical and quite common. So now that I've warned you about it, let's go ahead and do the grass, which is not where I'm going to screw up. We will start off with the same pattern as before, edit details, and you see you have 2 options here, grass and detail mesh. We're going to start with the grass texture. Just like before, now we're going to pick one of these realistic looking grass, something with blades to it. I'm just going to pick the first one. Okay, and I've always thought that these colors were really garish, so I'm going to change them to something a little more natural. I've never seen bright yellow dry grass before. Is that why they call it Amarillo? Because the grass is yellow? Get it? Spanish for yellow, Amarillo. Oh, that was an international joke right there. Yes. And it seems like it stops as soon as you get maybe 10 miles south and west of Fort Worth. Like after that, there's no green grass. Like there's that crazy tall sage grass stuff, but no green grass.
The training might be discussed with Israel.
The only green grass we have in Oklahoma.
Okay, the other thing I'll point out is this billboard thing, so we can talk about it here in just a minute. But I'm going to click Add, and now I've got a green grass texture. I can paint some green grass, and I'm painting, and I'm painting, and I'm painting, but nothing's happening. I'm not close enough, exactly. So the closer you get, this is a detail, the closer you get, the further I fall. Sorry, that was a country song. Alabama, I think. There we go. Okay, so you get close enough and you'll see this grass start to fill in. So you kind of have to be close when you're painting in the details. So this is the optimization that I was telling you about. It doesn't make much sense to draw all of these blades of grass, and incidentally, there is physics involved here. It assumes that there's wind blowing, so the grass is going to blow in the wind along with the trees. It's very peaceful and serene. Why would you draw that if you're 1,000 feet up in the air and you can't see it? If you're in an airplane looking down, you can't see a blade of grass. So why draw it, right? You're going to be right on the ground. But realize too that this works horizontally. So it's only going to draw the grass, the blades of grass, and have the blades of grass moving and looking pretty within your field of view. It's not going to be animating and displaying and computing grass that's behind you, and it's not going to be doing grass that's 1,000 yards downrange unless you've got your clipping plane set to 1,000 yards downrange or something like that. Yeah. In which case, you get what you ask for, right? Okay, so that's grass.
It looks a bit too dense.
Well, it'll look better when you get down in it. Whoop, too close. So we'll get down in it here in a minute. It actually looks pretty nice. And of course you can mix grass just like you can mix trees. I'm going to move over to an area where there's not so much grass so that I can show you the other one. And I'm going to make a really common mistake on purpose here because it's actually really funny. I'm going to go to Edit Details. I'm going to grab a detail mesh. And I'll go find a detail. Do we have any rocks? We don't have any rocks. Okay, we're going to go find some rocks. We used to have rocks in the assets. I guess they took them out. Could have sworn they were in terrain assets, but I guess they're not. Alright, so I'm just going to go back to the asset store and get some rocks. Sounds like Charlie Brown's Halloween, doesn't it? I got candy corn. I got caramel. I got a rock. Okay, let me find some rocks.
What's the most expensive rock?
The Hope Diamond?
No, the asset store.
Looks like 25.
Model of Hope Diamond?
Oh, there's one for 40.
Just look up the model of the Hope Diamond and see how much that is.
I have no idea if these are good rocks to use or not. Let's find out. Yeah, it does kind of look like a frog, doesn't it? I think you're being really, really nice when you say that, because to me it looks like something else. I'm going to go with the rock pack. I got a feeling about the rock pack. I'm getting a warm fuzzy on it. Okay, I'm going to download my rock pack.
Those have 5 stars.
It doesn't look too bad. If you're watching at home, you can fast forward. Okay. Import. I guess the full version has 2 more rocks. Or are they plus 2 rocks? Yay! Good, we were going entirely too fast. Okay. Edit details, detail mesh. I'm going to grab my rock. Pick a rock, any rock. Click add. Click the rock in the detail thingy. Oh my goodness, jumping Jehoshaphat. What in the world is going on here? I know, that's pretty wild, isn't it? That was not what we were expecting to get, right? Okay, so here's what we did wrong. Really, really easy mistake to make. Let's see if I can get out of this. There we go. I hope not. All right, click on our rock. Let's go to edit, and let's look at our mistake. We didn't read the screen. When you're bringing in something that isn't grass, you need to change the render mode to vertex lit. Oh! We should have changed the color too, right? But at least it's a rock now.
It certainly is something.
Something. Okay.
It looks like an alien.
Let's try again.
Looks like an alien food. Wow.
That's a big rock.
Moon in 99.
Big rock. Yeah.
I like to call the BFR 9000.
Helps a little bit, doesn't it?
Big.
BFR 9000. Okay. Good enough. I really just wanted to show you the difference between bringing in rocks, vertex lit. If you don't do it right, you're going to bring it in as grass, and it's going to sway in the breeze, and that looks even funnier than the giant acid splash that we got in the beginning. So if you see your rocks are swaying in the breeze, we obviously didn't pick a very good rock. Or I have not yet figured out how to manipulate this rock to my satisfaction. I suspect I just picked a big one.
I try the tree thing again. Try like spreading rocks like you do with the trees. I think that will work better. Professor?
Yeah, not really.
Come on, big rock.
But that's how you do it.
You can put the rock in the hole and make it a crater.
Right. Oh yeah, that'd actually be pretty cool. Oh, there's one more thing. I'm glad you said that. There's one more thing that you want to keep in mind when you're dealing with rocks as details on a terrain. They are subject to the optimization. So if you were making a game, I mean, the first thing that popped in my brain was when you said that was, oh, I could make this some sort of meteor crater, right? Which you could build anything from. If you're going to make it a meteor crater, then you probably don't want to use a terrain detail as the meteor because it's going to get culled. So if you wanted to view it from above or anything like that, it's going to get culled out with distance. So if it were an important landmark, you'd probably want to make it an actual, real, honest to goodness piece of geometry, and do it that way. Okay, so that's pretty much it. All of these work the same way. You've got you got to bring in your texture first. You got to bring in your tree map. You got to bring in your detail first, and then pick it down here and create from there. So it's a pretty simple pattern. All right, we haven't added a light yet. Why don't we do that? Let's go to Game Object, create a directional light. Looks a little better. This isn't a lighting class. I'm not going to spend a lot of time lighting it. What else do we need? We need a sky, right? Time for a skybox. I won't even charge you a ton of money for your skybox. How's that? Okay, I'm going to kind of make a view here so I can get down into the scene a little bit. Whoop, too far. Something like that. And let's line up our camera so we can at least look around. So when we click play, can't do anything yet. But at least we can see what's going on. There's a fly-through mode. I just can't remember how to do it right now. Do you guys know? Maybe it's on the game view. No, maybe it's on the scene view. Huh, I'll have to look it up. I don't remember. There's a default fly-through mode that you can use to just kind of zoom around without putting a controller in there. But I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. Okay, let's do the skybox. For the skybox, I guess I'll take my camera. And I'm not going to worry about messing it up because in a minute I'm going to get rid of it. See if I can do this without getting motion sickness. Oh, I know what I need to do here. It's easier. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to get to where I can see the sky a little bit. Skybox. So it's in render settings. Click on edit and then click on render settings. And then down here you'll see something called skybox material. But we haven't imported the skybox assets yet, so let's do that before we get too far into that. Let's go to assets, import package, skyboxes. Naturally you can make your own skybox. It's just a cube, a 6-sided cube with some clever mapping tricks that Unity uses to make it look like a sphere. Back in the day we used to put a hemisphere over our scenes before Unity, really, and that's how we did it. But it always looked weird. So Skybox is a little nicer. Okay, back to Skybox. We'll click the Skybox material, and now we have our Skyboxes since we imported. And just pick one. You can make anything a Skybox, but let's pick one of the Skybox, actual Skybox things. And you ought to be able to just pick one. The other thing that you can do since we're here is you can add fog to your scene. Thing about fog in Unity, a little bit goes a really long way. So you can see the fog density is 0.01 by default, and you can probably add another 0 in there and still be doing pretty well. So think tiny numbers. Tiny numbers. So fog is good for occluding distances. No one likes to look out in your game, look out at a horizon and have this sort of infinite artificial looking horizon. If you've got a little bit of fog in there, then it's going to add a little bit of atmosphere, and you won't be able to see quite so clearly the exact intersection of your ground plane and the sky. So different things you can change are available here. You can change the color of the fog. You can make it like spooky colors if you're into Halloween things. And just different settings you can play with. Okay, we got our skybox, we got our fog. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, pretty overcast. I picked a really overcast skybox, I guess. Is there a nicer one? Yeah, sunny sky. That's what I want to see. I want something happy. I don't want to be in Seattle. That's better.
Oh, snap.
That's a good sky right there. All right, let's save it. Let's do water and then we'll take our break. This will take like 5 seconds, hopefully. All right, we're going to bring in water if we're going to do the water. Import the package. Now there's 2 of them. There's the basic one and the professional one. And I've only ever dealt with the basic one, except in here, because I'm not wealthy enough to buy the pro one yet. I'm getting there though. Actually, the $75 a month thing is pretty affordable. I might be able to swing that. Here we go. So the difference between the two really is how nice the reflections are and the refraction and all of the effects that go with the water. I personally think the basic water looks really nice, but the professional water should look really good. Okay, so you need to go over into your assets and find the water. And we've got daylight water and nighttime water. The only difference between the two is the lighting and the shading that's applied to it. I'm going to go with daylight water. I'm just going to drag it out. It's going to come out in a disc, essentially. I'll go ahead and reset it and bring it up. Yuck, this is going to take too long. I shouldn't have reset it. Let me get rid of it. Force of habit. Where's my delete key? There it is. There we go. Okay, and I'm just going to try to get it in my little lake bed here.
Hey, look, hey, the tools are the exact same controls as you do in Mario.
Yes. I've heard the keyboard shortcuts are even the same. Get a little bit of lag. Probably because of the video recording software. I didn't think of that. Whoa, too big. Too small. I might have to turn my recorder off for a minute. Alright, so after fiddling with our water, we've got it where we want it. I'll turn the recording on just long enough to say we're going to pause here for a break.